did it again, doggone it. It's been one of those days, I tell you, one of those days. Never been that dirty to go panning in a bathtub. That was a question that our friend, oh, I don't have it now. I unstarred it. Oh, Secret Creek Prospecting was asking Andrew, I think, about panning in his bathtub. I wouldn't do it. Maybe if I was single, but I wouldn't do it. Megadog, Brewer, Dot, Steven, how are you? Angelias? Sorry. Tom, good seeing you all the way from Germany. We have our Aussie friends in the house. We have Terry Marshall, always good seeing you, Terry. Andrew's stage. Bent Fork, good to see you. Hobo Rob, good to see you. Well, my friends, Wandering Buffaloes, actually, that's where this shirt comes from. The Wandering Buffaloes. And it's Shad Biffle's birthday today. So, Shad, I hope you're out there having fun. I doubt if you're lurking. I know you and your other half are busy a lot doing whatever you do. So I hope you're enjoying your birthday, Shad. Tonight is episode 4 of Modern Gold Mine Methods with our friend from the land down under, Andrew Smith, CancerManAUS, formerly Adventure Gold. I knew it. I knew it. It's up here somewhere. Somewhere up there. But as Andrew's laughing at me backstage, but I'd be laughing at me too. We can only count to 4. Just repeat on the next 4. Megadog. Heath, how you doing, buddy? There's something coming your way, Heath, and I put in a new wooden nickel. It's in a protective case, and I did get out the veteran snuffer bottles yesterday. I didn't mail out any tracking information on that yet because they were all gung-ho to print it off. I usually get it emailed to me, that way I can copy and paste, but no. And I didn't mail them at my local post office because a lot of times by the time I get home from work, it's closed. So I mailed them from Urbana. But I'm pretty excited about tonight. I have no real news in the mining community that I put together. If I put it together, I might have. I've been kind of preoccupied lately with driving and work and reports. I still have my daily report to do, but like every Tuesday, it ain't done till way late or early in the morning. But oh, I think we're just gonna do it and let our friend Andrew take over the show. So don't go away because Andrew and I will be right back for episode 4 of Modern Gold Mining Methods.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Tuesday Night Hangout Live. It's Tuesday night Hangout Live. It's Tuesday night Hangout Live. It's Tuesday night Hangout Live with your host Ed Marvin. Tuesday Night Hangout Live is a Flash in Your Pan production.
Welcome back, Andrew.
Good to be back. Howdy, everybody in the chat.
Howdy. It's starting to cool off there, huh?
It is. It is.
Playing magic tricks.
Oh, I'm just letting people see those
Now,
little bits.
what's comfortable? Oh, the nuggies behind you.
Yeah, little specimens.
Larry, good to see you. Nice. I like that one on your right ear right there with the quartz. Nice. Nice. How much those weigh?
Not very much. They're only small.
Want me to put those up, Andrew?
Yeah, put them up. I'll just give a bit of a brief explanation about those two.
Okay.
So you can see that one with the quartz. And you can see how sharp the gold is. And that's how it was formed in the quartz. And the quartz is actually just broken away and it's left it very sharp. Hi, Gail. So these two bits were found in the exact same area the day I was panning. You see the other one that's with that little bit of ironstone. It's a little bit smoother on the edges. It's been a little bit more, spent a bit more time in the water. It's rounded the edges off, whereas the one with the quartz has still got those really nice sharp edges. And just going back to talking about, modern mining and how that gold gets liberated when it first hits the ball mill. Well, those two bits of gold there that you can see pictured, they virtually came from an area where there was a lot of turbulence in the water. So a lot of the rocks were getting ground and smashed and knocked against each other. And that's probably why you've got that bit there that's very sharp, fine edges. It's nearly like it's got fins. As I say, it's busted the quartz away. It's just left the gold sitting there. Yeah, I just thought that'd be a nice little background picture.
Yeah, that one looked like it just broke off the reef.
Yeah,
it was making its way down. Where this one, that one looks like it's traveled a bit farther.
Yeah. It was probably in a old sedimentary layer, that one, I'd say. It got glued up with the other conglomerates, and it's still partly glued to that bit of ironstone. Yeah, it's it's interesting when you actually find bits of gold, when you look at them and you look at how the shape of them and the texture and, you know, how it actually looks. And then you look at the area that you find it, and it all starts to make sense. If you get areas where it's just all gravelly and sandy, it's basically just all smooth alluvial and flat alluvials. And just every now and then you'll come across a spot where you get some gold that's relatively the same way it was when it was first formed, when it came up in the silicas. So if you actually look at
still there, Andrew?
Yeah, it's still there. There's a slightly different color in the gold too.
Okay.
One with the ironstone's a bit darker, and the one with the quartz is a little bit brighter. As I say, when you actually find native gold, it's not pure. It's got other metals with it. I say quite often you find gold wherever you find copper and you find iron. Yeah, other metals, arsenics, they change the color of it. Silver, tin. I say it all plays a role in the color of the gold. So if you get a really darkish, reddish gold, it's got a lot of copper in it. If you get a really light colored gold, a really bright colored gold, it's probably got a lot of silver and tin with it. And again, mercury actually does sit with native gold. And I was told that you've got to be careful with certain nuggets. If you turn them into jewelry and you actually have that gold on your skin can absorb some of the other metals out of that gold. So the likes of mercury, if you've got a gold ring and it's made from natural gold and hasn't been refined, and you're starting to see like a tinge or a bit of a stain on your finger where that ring is, that's the metals coming out of the gold. So I say, if you're ever going to... Yeah, well, Terry, yeah, you only got it in your mouth for a very short time, but if you're wearing it as jewelry, it's there quite often. And I say long-term exposure to native gold will actually start to draw some of those other metals out of it. And I say your skin's acidic, so it helps to actually draw those metals out. But yeah, just something to be aware of. That's right, Dave. Like copper, if you have a copper bracelet on, it will actually start to stain the skin. That's because the copper is starting to actually absorb into your skin. That's why it gives you relief on the joints. With some people, it does. And again, it's interesting not just talking about that. When we when we look back in history and we look at some of the big disasters that have happened with big mining companies, a lot of the disasters happen when you have a tailings dam that fails, and all those tailings make it into a waterway. Because a lot of those metals that are associated with gold are quite toxic when they start to actually decompose. So they start to oxidize, and that's generally why they try and put a really dangerous type of mineral. They may actually not put that through the plant. They may actually put it off to a side, stockpile it, and then they'll cover it with dirt to try and stop rainwater and oxygen from getting to it, to stop it from decomposing and releasing those toxins. Again, there's a lot of science in modern mining that, as an average prospector, we don't think about it, but it's quite entailed in actually managing a mine site really well. And I say I'm a little bit iffy about talking about the flotation, because been thinking about it for a few weeks. It's something you've got to have a great deal of respect for, because I say it can be harmful. I say when you're dealing with the top end chemicals, the high end chemicals that actually they use for flotation, they are harmful chemicals. You start using stuff that's not quite as bad, it doesn't work as well. It still works. It still floats the gold and the coppers and the other metals off, but it's just not quite as toxic. So again, if you want to look into it, you can do flotation at home. There's a little bit of setting it up to getting it right. And I say, what your returns will be will depend entirely on the actual material you're going to put through your flotation unit, which again, you need to work that material down. You need to make it as clean as possible, remove as much of the what they call slimes out of it, because that'll improve your flotation. Anyway, all right, we got any questions? Because I was going to talk a bit about.
Make sure to tag me or put some cues in the room.
Yep. So as far as the panning in a bathtub, I wouldn't recommend it. It's messy. It's messy. I say the only reason I did it was I was pretty unwell at the time, and I had a lot of people that had sent bags of pay dirt, and I just thought, well, that's the perfect way to actually show that, you know, here's the pay dirt. I'm going to sit at home in a warm tub of water. It was helping with the pain, and I could actually pan each one out and show everybody what I was getting out of the bags that were sent. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. Not very good for the bathtub. It destroys the finish. It scratches the crap out of the bathtub, especially if you've got a plastic tub. The old enamel ones might handle it a bit better, but so has anybody
Come
ever
on,
wondered?
people, don't be shy.
Has anybody ever wondered why, when you got a gold pan and you first put material into it, you put it in the water and you shake it, have you ever wondered why the large stones come to the top? You think about that, because large stones you think would be quite heavy and they would drop to the bottom, but that's not how it works with a gold pan. The large stones come up to the top. Does anybody know why that happens? And again, this will lead you into understanding how to capture gold better when you're actually gold panning and using a river sleeve. Surface area. So how does the surface area make the big heavy rock come to the top and the smaller lighter stuff go to the bottom? So if you've got a handful of dirt and a handful of rock, which weighs more, the rock or the dirt? So this is going to help.
Depends on the density of the rock.
It does, but generally you'll find when you actually take your pan down, you first fill it up, and you take it down, you put it in the water, and you give it a really good shake, you'll find all the large stones will come to the top. You're kind of right when you say density, but you've got to think about it's a bit like when you think about a ball mill, because to actually make a ball mill work efficiently, you have to put more than just big stuff in it. You have to put small stuff in it. It's the same with a gold pan. If you just fill it full of large rock and shake it, it doesn't really sort anything out, because it saves the large rock from top to bottom. But if you put fine dirt in there and you put coarse dirt in there with rocks and other aggregates, they separate out. So your small stuff will go to the bottom and your large stuff will rise to the top, even though quite often the larger stuff is quite heavy. It's simply because it's filling up voids. So if you've got a lot of large stones in there and you've got a lot of fine dirt in there, the fine dirt will work its way down through the voids. So if there's anything really heavy in it, like gold and that, it will work its way down through the voids, the same as it does in a stream. So if you've got your bed load, when you've got a flood and your bed load is just bouncing along the bottom, quite often you've got fines that are traveling up. They don't actually touch the bottom very often. They just travel in the top part of the bed load. But as it slows down, anything that actually has time to go down between those larger rocks will actually drop down around them. And if the flow and the pressure pushing on it drops off enough, it'll drop and sit. That's why I say if you shake your pan, it fills up all the voids underneath all the larger rock, and that's why the larger rock gets pushed up, because it can't go down any lower because it's just got nothing but a solid mass of dirt underneath it, so it lifts the heavy stuff up. And that's generally why when you first do your first pan, you give it a really good shake, and you'll be able to just lift it up out of the water and just put your hand on top and just push all the heavy stones straight off the top straight away. Do the same thing, put it in, give it a good shake. Then you start to slow your shaking down a little bit, not so aggressive, and then you'll be able to do the same thing. Pick it up, drain the water off, and just push the stone off the top. That'll speed your panning up. Rather than trying to use the water to push the stones out, just use your hand and just scrape it off the top. So you generally do that depending on the area you're in. You might do that 3 times. You might
just put it because stratifying.
Yeah, you're right, Ed, go.
I was saying because of stratifying, your gold drops, so brush it off.
Your gold should be the densest thing in the pan. So it should go to the bottom. So long as you're giving it a good shake and letting everything go down, yep, self-satisfying, that's correct. Exactly the same as how a stream works, except there's a couple other variables in a stream, and that's why you get deep holes of water and shallow beds of gravels and sands, because the water pressure itself doesn't travel straight. If it hits something, it'll go up, but then gravity takes over and it pushes it back down. So where it pushes it down, it lifts the heavies back to the top again, which I said it's a good thing to know, because if you're walking along a stream that actually has gold and you come across a deep hole of water, one of the best spots to look for gold is directly where that deep hole of water comes out, and it just starts to hump before it flattens off. So right where it humps, you actually get a little bit of a vortex happening, because the water comes up, that vortex is there, and then it starts to push back down again as it comes out of that deep hole of water. So right at the hump where it comes out of the deep hole of water, you quite often find good gold there. So
remember, questions are very welcome. So whoops. We call the halo often the bases of waterfalls.
Yeah, like for a large gold nugget to sit right in the bottom of a waterfall, it's rare, because in the full force of a flood, when the flood is at its maximum force, it has got its maximum lift out of the bottom of that waterfall. So that's when it's got the most pressure that can push it back out of the bottom and lift it back up to the top. As the water starts to die down, anything that's heavy may drop in and sit at the bottom, but then it's going to get covered up with more and more material as the flood starts to die down. G'day.
Hi, Sam.
So when you're walking along streams and that, you've got to be looking all the time. You've always got to be looking for features in the stream that will point you to where you're most likely going to find gold. And I say, when you've got a perfectly flat stream bed, and especially if it's running dead straight, your most likely spot to find gold is not in the center of the stream, but over on the 2 edges, because that's the slowest water. So if you think of picture in your mind a straight section of river or stream, right? It's got no ups and downs, it's just perfectly flat. And when that's in flood, the fastest water travels in the exact center. So not at the top of the water, not down at the the bottom, not on left or right bank, but right in the very center. That is the fastest water. And everything around that center starts to travel slower. So the further you travel towards each bank, because you got friction and the water has friction against the bank, it starts to slow down and allows things to drop out. Does flood gold occur in the deserts? Only if you got rain.
During flash floods in the washes.
Yeah, I say it's it does make sense when it's explained to you. It makes a lot of sense because I say if you take a stream and push it off the side and look at a pipe, all right, perfectly round. The exact same thing goes on in a pipe. The fastest flow in a pipe is right in the very center. Because you've got friction all the way around the outside, the fastest water travels in the center. Now, if your pipe is only half full, so go halfway between where the fluid is and the bottom of the pipe, halfway between, that's where the fastest water travels, or the fastest liquid. So if you've got other things inside the water, so let's say you've got sediments, let's say you've got sand, the heavier sand will travel towards the bottom, and the lighter the sand, it will start to travel up towards the center. Along the sides, you've got vortices. And as it creates vortices, it actually pushes all those materials back towards the center again because they curl around and it brings it back into the center. Oh, Heath, my magic 8-ball. I don't know. That's really up to Ed. Like I don't know about splitting with you, bud. I doubt it. If he finds 10 ounces of gold, I think you're going to have a struggle getting him to part with it. But yeah, it's
Right on, Hobo Rob. I saw you added a dog. Cool.
Yeah, understanding hydrology. And I mean, hydrology is just understanding how fluid moves and how it reacts with other things. I say when you start putting bends into streams and you put bends into pipes, it has some weird effects. I say it changes vortices. Vortices actually get smaller on one side and larger on the other. They get stronger on one side and weaker on the other. And I say it's when you actually look at the old timers where they used to work in streams, they love the inside bends because I say that's your vortices are actually quite strong on the outside and they push the material across to the inside bend. So you've got a couple of different vortices happening. You've got horizontal ones that you've got your bank friction, which is creating vortices on the bank. Then you've also got your horizontal ones because as the stream goes around a bend, it pushes up to the outside of the bend. Gravity takes over, it pushes the water down, and it pushes the water back down, which creates a vortice, and it pushes all the materials that's traveling over this side over to the inside of the bend, where the vortice starts to weaken off, and that's where your materials start to drop out. And then you want to get really technical if you start putting some obstructions in a bend. And I say an obstruction can be a temporary one, say a tree that's fallen down and it's been washed there and it's got snagged up in the bend. That completely changes all the vortices. And that's where the old rule comes in. Gold is where you find it because quite often it will actually push the gold out to the outside because it changes the vortices. It changes the fluid dynamics of how a bend normally works. Question. So in a river or a creek with a small falls, is it better to find gold where water comes up from the hole of the falls? I'm going to say yes, simply because that waterfall, it gives the gold and the other mineral rocks and materials a chance to actually re-stratify again as it's coming out of that deep hole of water. So yeah, I would say on the downstream side of that waterfall, that would be the best spot to look because I say anything that goes into a deep hole all comes back out on top and then starts to stratify out again. I say right where that material's coming up and it just peaks and you get a bit of a hump before it starts to taper off, that hump actually creates a vortice, and that allows anything that's heavy, that's spinning, it goes around, gets to the point where there's no pressure, it's pulling back into the water, it will drop and sit. Anything that's light will travel up and continue over the top and keep traveling down. Specimens on the screen. So they come from a really rocky area in a river. So there was a lot of agitation of the material as it was going over these rocks. And I think you'll find that's why that bit of gold with the quartz is actually quite sharp and it's got thin veins on it, because it got busted up as it's gone over those rocks, and it's just managed to drop and sit, and it never actually traveled after that. That's why it's still got those nice sharp edges on it. If that answers the question. Yes, make sure you hit the like button, people. Because I say, if you're looking at gold as you're finding it and you're seeing rough edges on it and they're not all smooth and rounded off, that means that gold hasn't traveled far in the water. That means it's probably come off a bank close by, which could be the source of the gold. So it could be in a vein of quartz. Because I say, generally, if you've got sharp gold that you can see there with that bit of quartz, it means it has not traveled far in the water. Because the further it travels in the water, the more likely it is to be smashed up with other rocks, and it just flattens that gold out, because gold is one of the most malleable metals we've got. So let's just talk about sluicing for a sec. Because I say, again, there is no one sluice setup that will do everything perfectly. All right, it's horses for courses with sluices, and again, it depends on what you're doing with it. If you take a river
truth,
and you put it in a stream, all right, and then you get a shovel and you just shovel gravel straight up off the shovel into the sluice, it will capture gold, but it won't capture fine gold well, and it won't capture coarse gold well. It will capture gold. It doesn't matter what setup you've got. It will capture gold. It's just how well it will do it. And that's where modern mining sort of looked at these processes and it started refining it. I just want to drop in and say hello. Yeah, mate. That's the good thing with
I miss
shade.
Laurel.
So if you're into river sluicing, and I say I did quite a bit of it, I found that classification gave me much better results. Now, see, I'm not going to comment on different types of mats because I've never used a mat. The closest I've gone is miner's moss, and I'm going to actually delve into this a little bit because I say miner's moss, again, depending on how you use it, will actually work really well or it won't work at all. So again, it's horses for courses. You can have a mat, and I'm not going to mention names because I say it's not really the point of what I'm going to talk about here. If you're shoveling coarse material into a sluice that's got a mat in it, all right, and it could have spirals, it could have little diamonds, whatever. It's the same as a bend, all right, because in a bend, vortices work in a certain way. You've got vortices that work horizontally, and you've got vortices that work like that. When you start putting other materials in that, it changes that bend, and it changes the way the vortices work. Well, it's the exact same with a mat. If you're putting rock into a mat, and those little vortices in the cells, if you get a rock sitting on top of it, well, it changes the pressure through the cell. So quite often you can have a cell that's sitting there, it's collected, you put one rock on top, changes the pressure, and will lift everything out of the cell, and it travels further down. So again, this is where I think you'll find that classifying your material before you run it through will actually see you get better results at the end of the day. Because the more you put variables into a sluice, the more chance you have of losing gold. So you're actually doing a lot of work and not getting the total reward that you can get. So it's the exact same with modern mining. They try and bring everything down so that everything works the same 24 hours a day. There's no variables. Water pressure doesn't go up, water pressure doesn't go down. You know, you don't speed the mill up and then slow it down. You try and keep everything constant throughout the different stages. And that's where it's important, because I say, if you break it down into different stages, you've got more chance of actually recovering more gold. It's the exact same with using a gold pan or a river sluice. If you just take it, drop it in the pan, wash it, flick it out, and then pick up your bits, you're probably throwing lots of fine gold away. Same as a sluice. If you just put a sluice in the water, shovel gravel into it, yep, sure, it's going to capture some gold. It's not going to capture it all. But if you were to say, right, I'm going to take my sluice and I'm going to take the Hungarian riffles out, right? Because I'm only working in an area that's got fine gold. I'm not looking for nuggets. The amount of classification you do depends on the material you're working with. So if you take the Hungarian riffles out of a sluice, what happens is you take some of those vortices out. So instead of the water going up and over a riffle, up and over a riffle, up and over a riffle, which is creating vortices all the time, which if you've got fine gold, it doesn't give it much time to actually sit on the bottom and drag along and get captured. There's lots of Andrew Smiths in the world, mate. We're like rabbits. We're everywhere. So if you take your Hungarian riffles out, that means a lot of the bigger rock that you put in will push those bigger rocks out, and it will allow the sluice to actually clear. But if you've got big nuggets, that also means
I classify bare minimum on the river, Gale, down to an eighth, but most time a quarter. All classify down to 40 or lower in my shed.
Yeah. So when you classify down to 40, Ed, you don't run Hungarian riffles, do you?
I would never go that small on a river or out in the field. If I'm running my sluice, even sluices, they say you don't need to classify up to 2-inch, right, number twos. I do anyway. Some sluices I'll classify down to a 4, which is a quarter, or an 8 on the river.
Yep.
When I get home is when I'll classify my material a lot finer.
Yeah. So what I'm getting at with this is, if you classify your material before you put it into a sluice, essentially what you're doing is you're actually removing the coarse material. So there's no need to actually have Hungarian riffles there, like big ones, because you're not, if you're classifying and you're looking at what you're actually tipping out of your classifier, if you're looking for big stuff, it will be in the stuff you're tipping out of your classifier. So the smaller you go when you classify, the less you want turbulence in your sluice. This is what I was getting at with the miner's moss. Quite often, if I was in an area where there was lots and lots of fine gold, I would pull everything out of the sluice but the miner's moss. All right, so basically when you held that sluice up and you looked down across the top of the miner's moss, it was perfectly flat. There was nothing going up and down. You put that sluice in the water and you look at the pattern of the water across it, it's just a flat sheet of water. All right, there's no ups and downs. There's no going up and down, up and down. And what that does is, if you've got fine gold, because the fine gold doesn't want to sit, if you've got Hungarian riffles, it wants to keep bouncing up and down because the turbulence and the vortices keep it moving up and down. If it's constantly moving up and down, it's bouncing. if you've got nothing that's actually causing the water to rise up and down, anything that's heavy is going to go straight to the bottom and it's going to drag. And if you've got miner's moss, it's going to drop into the miner's moss. And the other thing it does is if you've got lots of sands and that, it allows those sands to actually go straight off the top of the moss and they will just keep rolling along, whereas your fine gold will drop into it. Again, if I'm in an area where I was working lots of fine gold, I wouldn't have expanded metals, I wouldn't have riffles, anything like that. It was just the moss. It just made the cleanup at the end of the day that much quicker because there's that much less material you've got to actually go through to get that fine gold. Look, I highly recommend miner's moss if you're working with fine gold. Because I say, if you're trying to maximize the amount of gold recovered in a period that you're working, let's say today, and you're only working with fine gold, having the riffles in a sluice are going to hinder that recovery rate. It's going to hinder the way that fine gold gets captured. The more area that gold has to travel along the bottom, the greater the chance you've got of capturing fine gold. Every time the gold travels up and there's a vortice, the more chance it's got of traveling further down. If you've got riffle after riffle after riffle after riffle, and you're putting really dirty material in, all those, what they call the slimes, is helping push all those fine particles. Every time the gold particle lifts up, it's getting peppered by all those fine bits of sand and slimes, and it pushes it further down. But if it's not going up and down, it's just traveling along the bottom. Those finer materials travel higher up in the sluice, and the heavier materials travel along the bottom where the miner's moss is. Not sure what miner's moss is. Oh, wow. Can somebody explain, or does somebody have a picture of what miner's moss is? I would have a picture there somewhere. It's basically just a...
you know, a 3M pad. I don't have any miner's moss in here. I do out in my shed.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like a carpet of spaghetti.
That's probably the best way to describe it.
Wally, outdoor Wally.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, yeah, it is. It's basically just like spaghetti that's been flattened out into a carpet. But it's made of plastic.
Yeah, they if you ever see a doormat in front of a business that looks kind of like a Brillo pad or loosely woven, not SOS pad, but like a 3M pad. It's kind of like that. Wally really explained it pretty good.
Yep.
A mat.
So like Terry's just said there, he's got a nugget
of spaghetti.
But again, you're talking about processes. So you're dealing with one step, and then you move to the next step, then you move to the next step. So your nugget catcher, and I say if you watch a lot of the gold shows where they're using, wash plants,
right,
they've generally got a nugget catcher at the start. But again, think of exactly the wording of it. It is a nugget catcher. It is not designed to catch fine gold. So if you've got a nugget catcher in your setup and what you are working is predominantly fine gold, it's just another thing that's turbulating the water and getting caught up in vortices, which is sending it further down. So if you wanted to be, really pedantic about it, you could put Hungarian riffles, like really big Hungarian riffles at the start with expanded mesh and a nugget box, but then you're going to end up with a sluice that is humongously long, which means your cleanup is going to take so much longer. And again, if you're dealing with predominantly fine gold, you can eliminate some of the processes at the start. So you don't need a nugget box, you don't need Hungarian riffles, you don't need expanded mesh. This is all stuff you've got to carry in, all right? And the end result is that's more material you have to process, or more material you have to take home, and more material you have to process. So if you just want to deal with fine gold, you need to set up fine gold. Now, the other thing with doing just the fine gold, and I'm just going to work with the miner's moss, because quite often I would actually get somewhere and do a couple.
Here, I got a picture I could show.
Where I was just looking predominantly at fine gold, so I would actually take all of the riffles out, all the expanded mesh, all that stuff out, and I would just run miner's moss from one end of the sluice to the other, maximizing that capturing area for fine gold. Which also meant, as I was classifying the material, because I used to classify it into a bucket, and I'd 3/4 fill the bucket, I was starting to remove a lot of those fine silts and sediments out. So when I was putting it into the sluice, a lot of those fine sediments that help push the fine gold, they've already been cleaned out. So you're just taking a scoop out and you're putting it in, and the sluice is set up different. So you don't actually have to have the angle so steep. If you're just running miner's moss, you can start to flatten it out. You slow that water down that's traveling across it, and it's giving that gold more chance to actually sit on the bottom and travel across the bottom. The steeper it is, the more it wants to bounce up and down. So you can flatten it out, and you can actually work in areas that don't have good flow. But again, you've got to sacrifice something else there, and that's the amount of material. There you go. That's what miner's moss looks like. Now, it comes in different grades. You can get coarse, medium, and fine. So again, depending on what the gold is that you're chasing, you can actually change your miner's moss to suit. Because the coarse miner's moss will actually hold a lot more material, so it means your cleanup at the end of it's going to be quite a bit bigger. But that's exactly what miner's moss is. Yeah, you do see a few different colours, Gail. Black, grey, green, blue. I have seen some yellows.
Blue, yeah. They also have a backed miner's moss too. I prefer non-backed for sluicing.
It's easier to clean out. When you've got a backed one, generally what they're talking about when they say it's backed is it's got like a solid layer in it. So they may actually have a hot pan when they've actually made this miner's moss. The bottom that they've laid this on is hot, so it will actually melt it into a solid layer, and it doesn't let anything travel through it. Which, when you go to clean it out, makes it really difficult, because if you get fine gold that travels right to that bottom layer that's impermeable and nothing will go through it, that means you've got to work it really hard to get that fine gold back through all those loops of spaghetti and back out to actually get it. But yeah, does it make sense when I'm saying if you just use miner's moss when you're chasing fine gold,
Hard to me,
and you don't have the riffles in it, you're giving that gold more chance because it's sitting on the bottom all the way. If you've got riffles that are going up and down, you've got vortices there, and it's constantly keeping that gold traveling up and down, up and down. Same as in a river. If you get a dip that's going down, then up, and then down, as that vortice goes through there, it relifts everything back up, and it restarts the stratification process again. So every time it goes over it, it's got to start stratifying again. Whereas if it's not going up and down, it's stratifying from the very start of the sluice all the way down. Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to look at it another way, that's why you don't see really big riffles on a shaker table. They've just got little dips. And I mean, when I say little, they're tiny. and those things are set up reasonably flat, and the water flow across it is fairly small. Because I say, if too much water, going to create too many vortices over those little tiny gaps in the table, those little tiny drops. Yeah, the mat can create turbulence, but you're only talking very tiny little vortices. You're not talking big ones. Yeah, I say you can. There's various places you can get stuff to use as minus moss, and I say before minus moss was a thing, back when I was a kid, back in teenage days, we used to just use loop pile carpet, and we'd use that in the dredges, and we'd use it in the sluices.
Yeah, I had AstroTurf in mind for a long time.
Yep.
Some guy said it earlier. But yeah, indoor outdoor carpet. I've seen shag, like 70s shag carpet.
Yep. But the good thing with the carpet was, after a while, like after so many times of using it, like you would notice that if your dredge was sitting outside for a week or 2 weeks in the sun, it would dry out completely. And if you pick that mat up and you just give it a bit of a bang like that, the dust would fly out of it. So it's still got a heap of captured material in it. So what we used to do is, when we used a bit of carpet for a couple of months, we'd dry the carpet out and then we'd put it into a metal drum and we'd burn it. We'd burn all the fibers out of it and everything. So all that was left was ash and whatever material was trapped in that carpet. Then you take that, you wet that material. Don't try and pan it dry because it's just going to float all the gold off. Wet it, turn it into a slurry, and then pan it, and you're going to be absolutely amazed at how much gold you'll get out of burnt carpet. But again, then you have to get another bit of carpet and put in it. But I say, if you work in the building industry and you do a lot of renovations, you'll quite often come across places where they just strip the old carpet out. And I say it's no problem just to roll up a couple of meters of carpet, chuck it in the vehicle, and when you go home, cut a couple of strips out that'll suit your sluice. And that way you've got a couple and you're right to go. And again, let's go to the other extreme. Let's say you're going to an area where you've got large gold, where you're getting, pieces of gold that weigh, 0.2, 0.3 of a gram. Do you want to have miner's moss and all that in your sluice? Well, yeah, because there's going to be fine gold. Wherever there's coarse gold, you're always going to find fine gold. But if you're getting a lot of coarse gold, then you want to change your setup and you want to go, right, well, I'm going to have to put a couple of riffles in here because there's some quite large gold. But you've got to change your setup again. Because I say, if you're starting putting bigger riffles in, that means you're not classifying down to, say, such a fine material to put through it. Because if you're classifying down really fine, then you're capturing your gold, your large nuggets in your classification, and you're tipping it out before you're feeding it into a sluice. So you don't want to classify down that small if you want to use a sluice. If you're going to not use a sluice, then you want to classify down into a gold pan and then pan it. Gold panning is still, to me, the best way to actually retrieve gold, fine or coarse. Depending on your method and depending on how fast you want to go, you can capture ultra fine gold, or you can capture really coarse gold and lose fine gold. Or you can capture both if you want to take the time and have patience to actually pan really meticulously. And that's the word I'm going to use, is meticulously. So shake it, give it a nice shake, wash a bit off the top. Shake it, settle it down, wash a bit off the top. And I say, I used to quite often, I'd get down to a certain point and I'd turn the pan around. I wouldn't use the riffles anymore, and I'd back pan. Because I say, if you're careful and you watch, you'll actually start to see the fine particles of gold travel. As soon as you start to see them traveling over the smooth back of the pan, put it back, give it a shake again, settle it all down, and then just start that process again. Now, when you're doing that, you don't want to try and pan all of the waste material out. All right, you want to probably leave about a good 40% of what you've got left when you've got down those concentrates, because what you're going to do is you're going to pick your pan up and you're going to do that swirl. You're going to do it very gently. You're going to use your sniffer bottle. You're going to sniff up the bits, and then you're going to redo it again, shake it back down, and then swirl it again. Use a sniffer bottle. And you might have to use a sniffer bottle 3 times per pan. But that's how you'll get all your fine gold. Don't rush. What's the old saying? Haste makes waste.
No, take your time.
Again, Terry, yep, if people want to put cons over the shaker table, it's another step. It's another process.
Not everybody has a shaker table, Terry.
That's exactly right. And again, you're putting more processes in.
But not everybody has one.
The more processes you have set up, the better your chance of recovering gold. But the longer it takes and the more entailed it becomes, because you're breaking down each part of the process and you're doing one bit at a time. I say weekend prospectors, they don't have time to do a whole heap of processes. As I say, if you're working in an area that is predominantly ultra fine gold, you can remove a lot of the stuff that you don't need. You don't need expanded mesh, because fine gold, it's you're better off with carpet. So again, Gail, when you're talking about dirt and it's really dirty, when you're classifying into a bucket, all right, you'll generally have a bucket full of water. You put your classifier on top and you're shaking it. And as that material is going through the classifier, it's pushing water out, and it's also pushing those fine sands and silts out. So it's starting that cleaning process. And as you keep putting more material in the classifier and shaking it like that, and that dirty water is coming up and flowing out, you end up with a cleaner material. And then if you want to go the next step, once you've got half a bucket, 3/4 of a bucket, tip the dirty water off the top, fill it up with fresh water, and give it a good agitate. Stir it up. All that dirty water, tip it off, fill the bucket up with clean water again, give it another good clean, get rid of the sands. Because the more you do that, the more of that fine gold you're going to capture when you start putting into the sluice, because you don't have all those fine particles peppering that fine gold as it's getting bounced along. You're giving those fine particles of gold more chance to sit on the bottom and drag along and get caught in that miner's moss. Yeah. Well,
let me interrupt you for a second, Andrew. Heath says, Gail, clean it. Now, actually, I have an old video, because there's times like, especially when I used to ran miner's moss and expanded metal in my dredge, you end up with a lot of cons. So, and sometimes they're pretty dirty cons. So what I did is I'd take a bucket, I'd spray it with a hose, it gets the turbidity up, it agitates the dirt or the cons, the turbidity, I know I'm acting that word, but all the junk comes up. You pour that off, repeat until your material's clean to run into your blue bowl or your Miller table or something like that. That's something I do in the shop.
Yeah.
But I have cleaned my material before I actually threw it in other stuff, especially in tools that you recirculate, like a blue bowl or a Miller table. You don't want a bunch of dirty cons going into it.
So when you watch the gold shows where they've got the wash plants and that,
All right,
you will quite often see that they will actually have what they call a settling pond. That's where the water that's coming out of their wash plant has time to settle the fine sediments out before it's pumped back up and through the wash plant. Now, the more you can get that water to settle and become clear, the greater your gold recovery will be using clean water. Because what you've got to remember is the more dirty the water is, the more density it's got. And the more density it's got, the more it can push stuff. Like air is not dense. You can grab a handful of air and throw it at someone and it won't hurt. But if you put a handful of dirt in and throw it at someone, it's got a bit more force because it's got density, and water is the same. Air and water act very, very similar. So if you start putting things into the air, such as dust, and you're standing out in a really windy day and you're getting peppered with dust, you think about that with fine gold running through a sluice, because that's the exact same thing that's happening. Those little fine particles of dirt that's in the water, they actually hit those particles of gold and keep pushing them along. If there's no particles in the water, that gold's got more chance to drop to the bottom as it's traveling down a sluice. But yeah, it's one of those things. I can promise you, the cleaner the water you run through a sluice, or the cleaner the water you run through a high banker or through a wash plant, the better your gold recovery will be. Because the dirtier the water, the more it's going to push the stuff along. I say, if you're just out and you're gold panning and you've got a bucket,
yeah, the more surface tension, the dirtier the water.
Correct, because I say it's your particles of gold are trying to get down through all those other particles. So it holds the finer gold up in the water flow for longer. Because I say you've got turbulence along the bottom, and if the water's really dirty, those particles can't make it to the bottom, so they stay in those layers where they're not quite at the bottom, but they're mixed up with all the other particles. But if you've got clean water, the less of those particles the gold interacts with, the gold will go to the bottom. That's not a hypothetical. That is the honest truth. That is why when you look at Miller tables and things like that, they are running super clean water because there's no other particles pushing on the gold. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's just like a big Pinto game. The more the gold particles, the fine gold particles trying to get to the bottom, the more they're bouncing off stuff, the longer they stay up, floating along. I say the trick is if you can get the gold to stay down to the bottom and traveling at the bottom, the more chance it has of getting caught into that miner's moss. I say if you're in an area where you're just working ultra fine gold, you don't want Hungarian riffles. You don't want expanded mesh that's constantly causing vortices and turbulence. And again, with the mats are doing the same thing. They've got ups and downs, and your water's going up, down, up, down, up, down, and it's constantly keeping that fine gold traveling in the water flow. The detergent only breaks the surface tension. It has no effect with the flow of water from the surface of the water down to the bottom of your sluice. Detergent will not have any effect at all. It only works on surface tension. And again, if you're feeding a sluice, or if you're feeding a cleanup sluice or a Miller table or anything like that, most important thing, do not put the material in dry. Even a blue bowl. You're putting material in dry, you'll see gold float and it will go straight to the center of the blue bowl and down through the middle. It must be wet before you put it in. You must remove that surface tension.
Oh, yeah. It's always better run your material wet.
Absolutely.
When you have that option. Don't want nothing wet if you're using a dry washer.
That is one of the good things about gold
That's
panning.
a whole nother beast I have no experience with.
It's messy. I can tell you that. I've done a bit of dry washing. I've actually worked with some large dry washing plants, and it's messy. But again, if your setup is good, I'll tell you one thing about dry washers: they're high maintenance because you're dealing with dust. And again, this is where I said air and water act very, very similar as far as gold capturing goes. When you're dealing with dust, you have a lot of maintenance work to do. Because if you're running a petrol motor, you've got to have a good clean air filter in it. And so if you're working with dust, you're breathing it, your machine's breathing it, and it clogs things up. If you don't maintain those machines, you start to lose your gold. Yeah, I say you can't run dry material down a sluice. You can, but you're throwing gold away. It literally will be running out the end of your sluice. You won't see it, but I can tell you now, it'll be running out the end of your sluice. You've got to wet the material. Even if you take a gold pan, all right, and you walk up onto the side of a creek bank, sort of a stream bank, and you dig up dry material and put it in that pan. If you take it down, submerge it in the water, and then shake it, you've lost gold. You have lost gold straight away because any of that gold that, because it's dry, gold is naturally hydrophobic. It does not like water. It repels against water. It will lift that hydrophobic gold up and just float straight out of your pan. So what you want to do is don't overfill your pan. That's always a golden rule. Never, ever overfill your pan. Take it down to the water's edge, get your hand and just scoop a bit of water in and then start mixing it up. And you keep mixing it up and you keep adding a couple of handfuls of water in until everything in there is wet. And then you put your pan in the water, not before. Dry material is one of your enemies. It will cause you to lose a lot of gold. Again, dry blowers catching 80%. It depends on the size of the gold and it depends on how you set up a blower. If you use too much air, it's exactly the same as putting too much water through a sluice. All right, too much air will cause fine gold to travel out. Not enough air won't clear the actual dry blower, and you end up with a lot of material that's just not going to catch anything. Again, I still maintain that if you're putting a gold pan at the end of your sluice is not set up right in the first place. And I say this comes down with actual experience. And I say I try and pass on as much experience as I can. That way you don't fall into the same traps as other people. Because if you're putting a gold pan at the end of it, that means that's another process you've got to do of cleaning up the end of it. And if you're running your sluice right, there'll be nothing in the gold pan. And again, gold pan's at the end and the water's dropping in. It's creating turbulence. Anything that's fine gets lifted out of the gold pan.
We all have dirt saved, Gail.
Jeffrey Button, I've noticed that when I put my pans in. I've tried doing it slow, but the way you explain makes sense. I've done it both. You should try. Initially, don't overflow. I say one of the golden rules with gold panning: don't overfill your pan. You're not going to get more gold if you fill your pan up more. All right, it will actually take you a lot longer to actually pan one pan if you overfill it. If you half fill a gold pan, that's probably about optimum. All right, if you've got a good panning technique, you'll pan more gold by only half filling your pan than you will if you fill it to the brim and then try and work every pan down from chock-a-block full. I wouldn't recommend using wet sluicer equipment for dry, then make not good dry. No. Again, horses for courses. And if you're working in an area that doesn't have water, well, you don't have a choice. You've got to work dry. All right. And obviously for me, if I was going to be working in an area that didn't have water, I'd be aiming to go with a metal detector. Which again, horses for courses. If you've got a detector that costs you $300 or $400 and you're working with fine gold, you're probably not going to find much gold. You need a detector that's going to pick up fine gold. but you're going to have to just be patient and persistent with what you go through, because say every tiny little signal, you're going to have to work it to get tiny little bits of gold. But that's the difference between a cheap detector and an expensive detector. Cheap ones won't pick up the small stuff, the more expensive ones will. But yeah, if you're out in the desert somewhere and you don't have access to water, you can dry pan. But again, you have to take the time and you have to know what you're doing when you're dry panning. And one of the secrets of dry panning is when you start to shake it, what happens to all your heavy rocks? Do they come to the top or do they go to the bottom? Is it different to wet panning, or is dry panning the same? I'll let the people in the chat answer that.
I haven't had to dry pan much in my day.
Because you're dry panning, the light materials will sit over the top of the heavy materials. So your heavy rocks will go to the bottom in a dry pan. It is different. That's exactly right. And one of the ways, if you actually look at the old black and white pictures, you'd see they'd hold the pan, and if there was a bit of a breeze, they'd stand diagonal to the breeze and they'd flick it up in the air. Not very high, they'd flick it up, and the fine dust would travel off. And then the heavies would drop back into the pan, and they just keep doing that flick, flick, flick. And that's how they get rid of the fines off it. And then they could actually go through it with their fingers and just push the larger rocks out. And again, when you come to the point where you've got nothing but fine, you just want to use your breath and blow the dust away, and then you can actually see the fine bits, and then you'd be wet your fingertip, dab it on the gold, put it in your jar. Dab it on the gold, put it in your jar. It's a different process. All right, good night. Yeah, kids, can't keep them up late. Yeah, it's a different beast. I say working material dry and working it wet is two different methods. It's I say it's messy, it's dirty. It's a lot dirtier than wet panning and sluicing. But one of the upsides is not many people like working with dry material, and that actually opens up a whole different area for people that don't work dry material, because that means you can go to areas that other people don't want to work.
Yeah, the Spanish used to do that a lot in the arid parts of California and other Southwest states during the gold rush.
Yep.
They'd use a blanket, and much like Jeffrey said, kind of like removing chaff from seeds. Yeah.
Yep.
Or like chaff from wheat.
Again, if you start putting, when you're talking working dry, if you start putting processes in, you can actually start to eliminate some of those materials you don't want. So if you've got a slant screen, and you've seen people set up a slant screen and they shovel the material onto the screen, coarse material bounces down to the bottom, the fine material travels through. You can either A, go through your coarse material with a metal detector to see if there's any nuggets in it. But as you're shoveling that material onto the screen, if there's a bit of a breeze, it will blow some of that finer material away. So what's collected on the back side of the screen is a bit coarser, but it's got as not much dust in it. So it helps start to separate and classify your material back. But yeah, it's so when it comes to using stream sluices, the more you classify and get it down to a uniform size, the more you can start to remove stuff out of your sluice to actually just let the gold travel flat all the way through it. And as it's dragging across miner's moss and that, it'll drop into little pockets. And again, the more you classify it, the less flow you have to have going through it. So if you've got a creek that's only got a very small flow, definitely classify your material before you put it through, because you're not going to have enough water there to clean your sluice out. And that's another thing that people make a mistake with sluices. If you're putting material in, all right, and then you need to sit there and use your fingers to clear it, you've either A, got not enough flow or not got enough slope on your sluice. There is no one perfect angle, because I say it just depends on the material and the flow that you've got as to how you set them up. So the more you classify it, the less flow you need and the flatter you can set it up. And so the flatter you can set it up, the more chance that gold has got of sitting on the bottom and traveling. Because the steeper it is, the faster the water is going to travel and the more it's going to want to push fine gold along. So if you're classifying it, you can flatten it out more. It'll drag along the bottom more. So what you want to aim for when you're setting up a sluice, if you're classifying into a bucket and you'll say, let's say a half filling a bucket, and it doesn't matter what size the bucket. By the time you finish putting the material in the bucket into the sluice, all right, the material should still be sitting in your sluice. You walk away, go back to where you're digging from, you classify it. When you walk back to the sluice should be clean. All right, there should be nothing that you need to pick up and move. If you're picking stuff up and moving it before you start putting the Lexon material in, you need to do a bit of adjusting. If you're putting the material in and it's going straight out and you're not seeing anything collect, again, you need to adjust your sluice and you need to bring it back. You need to either reduce the amount of flow going through it or reduce the angle. So as you're putting material in, I say if you've got a flare on the front of it and you're dropping it on the flare, which is the correct spot to be putting it, if you put a shovel full, like a garden spade, little planter's tool, and you go like that, and you see a blob of material, you should start to see the water wash around the edges of it and just slowly start to drag that material away until eventually it clears and the water just starts to run out. If you're dropping a shovel full in and it's just going whoop and vanishing off the flare, it's not right. You've got too much flow. It's got to happen gradually. If the water's slowly dragging around the edges of it, it's giving that material time to stratify out and it's allowing the heavies to travel along the bottom. If you're dropping it in, it's just washing straight out, the gold's going straight out with it. And if you're feeding it really quick and you're seeing nothing but a layer of sand all the way down it, you need to slow your feed rate down. So as you're putting it in, as it starts to disperse and you're starting to see where it's just about to clear and it's just about to go back to a clear flare, then you can put your next sort of material, your next scoop of material in. Again, you've got to constantly keep watching. So if you've been, let's say you've put 4 buckets through, right? And you got your 5th bucket, you walk up and you look down at your sluice. If you're seeing nothing but a layer of sand and not seeing much miner's moss, it's time for you to lift that sluice out and clean it out. Because what's happened is all of that miner's moss, all the catching spaces in that miner's moss is now full of material. Right? And if you're not seeing loops and little gaps in that miner's moss and you're still putting material in, your gold's traveling straight across the top and it's running out the back. Mr. Logue, I see so many sluices running with the water to the top of the box just because the sides are that tall doesn't mean no. You don't, again, you're not looking at the sides of your sluice and determining that you need to actually have that much water in it. You just want enough water to clear the material. So if you're not classifying and you're putting stones that are golf ball size and bigger in, all right, if you want to actually just have that sluice working to that optimum, you need to have enough flow, which means enough water in it that will actually move that size stone along in the sluice. Again, if you're putting your hand in and flicking them out, you're not maximizing your gold capturing time. So again, it's horses for courses. If you're shoveling in really coarse material, you need to have a fairly aggressive setup on your sluice. You need to have a good flow and a good angle to actually keep clearing it out. Otherwise, you're going to spend time constantly clearing stones out, which is not time where you're actually digging material that contains gold.
Hey, Andrew. We're
Yeah.
we're about an hour and 30 minutes into it almost.
Yep.
Need to use the restroom or anything?
Yeah, sure. Let's have a break.
All right, everybody. We'll be back in 2 minutes and 11 seconds with this quick intermission. Don't go away. Our friend Andrew will be back with more modern gold mining methods. Be right back.
Take a break, but don't go far. Gold fever's burn like a shooting star. Grab a snack, stuff gold without still more stress. Let 'em spit the talk I walk about. Shovels in the dirt, pickaxes high, treasures waiting, reach for the sky. Tuesday night, hangout live, don't go away. We'll be back real soon, there's more to say. Legends of gold, secrets untold. Hunt's not over, there's more to unfold. From lost mines to rivers wide, prospectors digging side by side. Old time stories bring the new finds, gold's any treasure, it's the richy high. So breathe your time, shovels in the dirt, pickaxes high, treasures waiting, reach for the sky. Tuesday night, hangout live, don't go away. We'll be back real soon, there's more to say. Legends of gold, secrets untold. The hunt's not over, there's more to unfold. As what is Sean the Prime has his finger on the hair behind, that's our gold.
All right, welcome back.
Howdy, howdy. So, just talking about dirty water, going back to what Gail was saying.
Right.
The reason dredges work so well is because they pump so much clean water through over the actual sluice, over the tray. So as you're sucking along, all right, the dredge is actually picking up clean water and it's driving it through the actual suction hose. So it's got a lot of clean water going in. If you're working really, really muddy clay material, you'll find that your sluice box will clog up. Right, but if you stop the suction, right, and you just let the actual water go through your suction hose, through the suction nozzle, which is generally going to be clean water, it starts putting clean water back over the bed and it will clean the bed off again. So it gets rid of a lot of fines that have built up behind the riffles. Again, it's looking at your actual setup and watching it and keeping an eye on how it's actually operating. Quite often with dredges, you'll see with the suction nozzle, they might have a cross. They might weld a cross over the start of the suction nozzle. That's to reduce the size of the rocks that go through it. Because if you've got a 4-inch, which is roughly that big, and it's picking up rocks that are 3.5 inch, it's dumping them into the actual sluice box. All right, and quite often there's not enough flow. If you don't have a big enough pump, not enough flow to push those rocks out. So one of my jobs as a kid, when I was out dredging with the family, my job as a kid was to sit on the pontoon dredge and clear those big rocks out. As soon as they hit the crash box and they'd come out, I'd have to pick them up and just work them out to the side. Because what would happen if you actually watched as a big rock had come through the crash box and sit in the actual sluice box, as soon as the water started traveling around it, everything that was collected in the sluice around those riffles would lift and start to travel down the sluice. And this is the importance of having those material cleared out, because the longer they sit in there, the more chance it's got of picking the material up and moving it further down every time. So again, dredging was always good because it was always putting fresh water across that material and allowing it to clean all the fines out. I know it was a good picture, that. I just thought that'd be a nice one to put up today. I say, just a perfect example of how gold looks when it hasn't traveled in water for a very great distance. So it's just gone over, that rock is broken, and that bit of freshly liberated quartz, it's still got the big quartz attached to it, has just let that gold come out, and it's just sat and not have water and sands and that bang on it, and it's got those nice sharp edges on it. Yeah, I say if you're dealing, and I say again, I'm going to keep talking about fine gold because that's more and more what people are going to be starting chasing going into the future years, because there's more and more fine gold out there than there is coarse gold. Coarse gold is being found more often in the past, but not so much into the future. Who's the fellow?
Wally, that's Andrew Smith. You might know his channel, his old channel, Adventure Gold. That's been retired. He's a professional miner, worked in he worked in very large gold mine in Australia, and is I don't like using recreational. He's also a small scale miner, prospector. You could call it recreational too, I guess.
Yep.
But
yeah, recreational. I used to do it for fun.
My West Coast mentality with prospecting, I don't like using the word recreational. There's legislation behind that reason too, Andrew. One day we could talk about it.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to get more and more regulated as the years go by. And again, I want to really say that we've all got a responsibility. Every single one of us has a responsibility. And if we do the right thing, it's going to remain something that we can continue enjoying into the future years. And our kids and our kids' kids can enjoy it in the future years. If we're not responsible with it, we're going to lose it. And when we lose it, we're going to lose a lot of our history too.
Right.
Yeah.
They need to know about it, because nowhere would be anything without mining. Look what happened here out west, from coast to coast, really. In Australia, New Zealand, Africa, you name it.
Yeah.
The mines in Lebanon and wherever.
Yeah. And I say as much as I'd like to go into the flotation process, because I say there is a lot of gold to be recovered that way, there is also a lot of responsibility that comes with it. And I don't know whether people are ready for that yet. So I'm a bit cautious about wanting to actually let too much on about that. But in years to come, they may refine it a bit more and it won't be so harmful.
Etiquette, you're right, Wally. Just like you were talking about in your video the other day, and others have talked about. And my comment on it, and you've heard me all say it before, you've heard Andrew saying it if you watched his other stuff. we're all ambassadors of our lifestyle, of the small scale, weekend warrior prospector. Those outside of our circle will judge the whole community by the actions of few. So we always have to be on our toes, always putting forth the best visible example we could be. If they see us not filling holes where it's required, it leaves a bad taste in their mouth. Digging in banks, which is not good for the ecosystem and erosion reasons, but it don't look good for us. Many states it's illegal. It's against the rules. And doing stuff like that, you know, if we don't have the proper etiquette and be good ambassadors, they'll take away access. Private companies that allow prospecting, like out west and in Maine and stuff, if you abuse it, they're going to shut down land, even public land. So,
So this is why in professional mining, reclamation is such a big thing, and you've got to have that funding there before you start the mining. You've got to have that funding there for your reclamation of what you intend to mine. So let's say you're going to start off, and it's going to be a registered mine, but it's going to be small scale. The actual departments that look after your mining lease to make sure you're responsible with it will say, right, you need to have this much money set aside for reclamation, because this is what we deem you will need at the end of it. And if you don't come up with that money, then you're not going to get your permit to mine. Now, that's one of those safety clauses to make sure that we look after the land that we're actually mining. And it puts a lot of people off because they go, oh, I don't have the money for that. So it stops a lot of those people that don't have the environment forefront of their mind, which to me is a good thing. It may prevent a lot of bad things from happening in the future, because I say you look back at history and you look at some of these big mines, and the actual procedures weren't there, and the safety things weren't there, and they've gone on to cause deaths of animals and people. Like, they've actually killed a lot of people with toxic waste from mines. And this is why they actually have all these safety procedures in place before you actually get a miner's permit to actually start your own professional mine. Because I say we're dealing with, and again, this is where you start looking at geology, we're dealing with other minerals other than just the gold. All right. And some of these things like arsenic is a natural mineral, which deep in the ground, it's not too bad. You bring it to the surface where it's actually exposed to rain and it's exposed to oxygen, and it starts to break down, and those toxins and arsenic makes it into the waterways, and it starts killing things. And it makes it into our waterways, and we all need water to survive. So you've got to be mindful. Again, Terry, it depends. If your mining setup is in an area where you can actually have your own vegetation, like your own little nursery and that, and you can propagate your plants and your vegetation there on site, you don't have to buy it, but you have to be able to show that in your documentation that you have already got the setup there to do it. And again, like Hobo's prospecting is exactly right. Research. You can go to some areas and they don't have arsenic in the ground. So that's one less thing you have to deal with. But it's all part of the process of actually setting up and operating and using a mine, is you've got to know what you're dealing with. And I say it's just like knowing exactly what sort of gold you're going to go chase. If you're going to go chase coarse gold, your setup's going to be different to if you're going to go and chase fine gold. And I say there's no one setup that will do everything perfectly. They'll all capture gold. It's just how well they'll do it. Yeah. Again, if you're working in a desert area, they're not going to be too much worried about vegetation being put back in because you're basically dealing with a desert. But your water's one of the biggest things. How you look after that water, because basically when a mine gets water, that water should not go back into the system other than evaporation. If it's making it back into waterways or back into the groundwater table, then you're not doing something right. Because that water that the mine uses is just for the processes of that mine. So you lose it through evaporation. Through the mining processes, you've got a lot of heat. Most modern mines, they'll all run their processing water at about 30 to 40 degrees temperature. So it's starting to evaporate. Like it'll start to evaporate from about 25 degrees onwards. The hotter it is, the more it'll evaporate. So if you go to a modern mine during winter when it's very cold, you'll see a lot of steam coming off different areas because that's just the nature of the beast. Friction. You got rocks rubbing together, you got metal grinding around and round and round. It creates heat. And so when you got water in the mix, that water starts to evaporate, so you lose that water quickly. Then you got to replace it with water. Well, again, it's a whole different beast. Modern mining is a different beast to what we do on a weekend, or as a hobbyist. As people that go out and just enjoy gold panning and that.
Right. Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but you get a lot of. I used to get a lot of comments about dirty water from gold panning. It's like, yes, it does create dirty water, but if you go downstream 100 meters from where I'm panning, the water is 100% clear again. There is no, because I say all those fine sediments, they just drop back out again.
Oh yeah, the turbidity drops out pretty quick.
Yeah, especially if you've got a couple of pools of water where it's the water's fairly calm, it'll drop back out again. People say, "Oh yeah, but you're actually stirring it up." And you say, "Yep, it's exactly the same process as when you get an influx of rain, and it starts washing the material in. It's the exact same process. It's just that I'm doing it on a very small scale when I'm gold panning or running a sluice." Everywhere you go, the rules are different.
That's true. Everywhere.
So again, it depends on the environment you're working in. Some environments are more fragile than others. So again, if you want to talk here in Australia, in New South Wales, you are not allowed to do any sort of prospecting in national parks. There are some national parks. There is an exception to the rule. There are some national parks that they do allow prospecting in. Only some, and you have to have a permit to do it. So, depending on the area, yep, there's different rules. Which I say, if we follow the rules, there's not a problem. But I say people just get a little bit too think they're going to make a fortune out of doing it, and they start doing the wrong things, and it wrecks it for everyone. And it doesn't just wreck it for the people in that area; it wrecks it for the people all around the world. Because I say, like Ed just said, we all get judged on the actions of a very few. And I say, we see something bad happens, and they go, "Oh, we don't want that to happen here, so we're just going to ban all these people from doing all this kind of stuff." Well, that's not fair. That is not fair at all, because we're not all like that one person that did the wrong thing. I know so many of the prospecting community all around the world. They go into areas and they pack out rubbish that other people have left behind. And that's one of the great things about prospectors. They do that kind of thing. They enjoy the areas they go to, and they don't like seeing all this rubbish that people leave behind. So they do the right thing. You often don't hear about that. But I can guarantee you that that is something that most prospectors do.
It should be down in the description, Wally, but Mr. Lodak, could you do that, please?
There's not many of my old videos up. Most of them are gone, but I've put some of my old videos up on the new channel. Thank you, Jerome. Good job. He's a good moderator, isn't he?
He's the best.
The best. How much
the
is
world's
greatest
moderator, Mr. Lodak?
How much do you get paid, Jerome? This has got to be something that you guys need to disclose. No NDAs on this. Oh dear. Yes. Get paid in stickers.
He gets paid in stickers.
But honestly, like people are using sluices, have a really good look at your setup next time you go out. And I say, if you're not picking up bits of gold that are 0.2, 0.3, and it's all really small gold, start to have a really good long hard think about do I need riffles in the sluice? Do I need to have expanded metal in it? I promise you, if you start taking some of these things out, well, one, it's going to save your carton a lot of weight, but two, you'll find that your fine gold recovery will start to improve. Again, see, again, it's hard because when you're dealing with people outside of the prospecting community, they only rely on the information they get. And unfortunately, the information they get is generally on the news, and the news is generally only there to tell you about bad stuff. So they talk about people that get fined, they talk about people that get prosecuted, and it talks about all the bad points. I say they don't ever go on there and say, oh, did you know, there was probably about 100,000 prospectors worldwide that picked up rubbish this past week. You never hear that on the news. I only ever hear about the bad things. And again, it's that misunderstanding and that lack of knowledge that leads people to actually go, no, prospectors are bad. They do bad things for the environment. No.
Or they judge us by Gold Rush. And we're nothing like it.
Yeah. But again, that's just lack of knowledge and lack of understanding, because I say they watch a show and think that's what everything is like. And I say I'm not a huge fan of those shows, because those shows do not show anything like the reality of what people that go out and do it for enjoyment. We're nothing like that. Yeah. Yep. And I say I've seen that. I've gone into areas and just seen lots and lots of holes where people have gone along metal detecting, they've dug it, left the hole and walked away. It's not the done thing. And I say, if I'm walking along with my pick, and I've normally got it hanging in the thing when I'm detecting, lay the pick on the side and just drag it over the hole. Just drag the dirt back into it. Takes less than 5 seconds and it's done. So I say, just a couple of seconds to do the right thing will mean years ahead of us we'll still be able to go out and enjoy this stuff. If we just take the time and actually think a little bit about what we're doing, we make sure that our future generations can enjoy the same thing. I say, if it's eventually to the way that we can't do it anymore, then we lose a lot of our history, because I say on this show with Ed, we often talk about history, and Ed puts up great little shorts about different parts of history and what went on. And if we lose that interest in gold prospecting, then we lose that part of history, and we lose a lot of valuable information. You learn a lot by looking back.
Yeah,
So
you
a lot
do.
of the information I've learnt, about gold prospecting and that is from the old people, the old timers. I used to spend a lot of time talking with old prospectors, guys that used to do it back in the end of the gold rush days. And they'd just tell you stuff, and you just think, well, that makes a lot of sense, and you just take that out into the field, and you go, well, that works perfect. And then I say you get into the modern stuff now, and they go, if you use this particular product or you use this type of equipment, you'll get more gold. It's just a selling thing. It's just a selling thing. All right, they're there promoting a product. They're not actually there promoting what you're wanting to do, and that's enjoy yourself. So I say, just don't get caught up in all the hype with, if you buy this, you're going to get more gold. No, that's not exactly right. It may help, but you've got to go where the gold's going to be, and you've got to have the knowledge in your head knowing that if you look in the right spot, you'll find more gold. Having a certain product won't guarantee that you're going to get more gold. It's your knowledge. Knowledge will always bring home more gold than a certain type of product will. It's a trap. It's very trappy. I say a lot of people get caught up in the hype, and they think, oh yeah, everybody's talking about this type of product, and they go and buy it. They go out and they use it. And they go, well, gold recovery is not improved, but they've already been caught. And that's no different to the old gold rush days, because there were the exact same processes going on. Like there was always people that were selling products. They were selling picks. They were selling shovels, and they say, this is the best shovel you can buy on the market today. It's got stronger steel, it's a better build quality, and all that. And people would get caught up in it. And then, once people started saying, "Oh, I've got this shovel, it's really, really good," and then everybody else go, "I'm going to go and get that shovel because this guy said it's really good." At the end of the day, it's a shovel. And I say, you get caught up in the hype of a product.
Right.
Mining the miners, that's exactly right. And I say, if you want to go back and look in history, 90% of the people that went out chasing gold never actually made any money. All the money that they actually had went into people that were selling products. Again, one of the most expensive things you could buy on the gold fields was fresh water. I know that sounds funny, but that is one of the most expensive commodities you could buy out on the old gold fields was fresh water. And quite often, fresh water would travel for hundreds of miles to get to a gold field.
Go ahead, keep talking, Andrew. I'm going to give away a sticker pack before the night.
And just another little thing from gold rush days, a bit of history. We all heard of the term grey water and black water. So when you actually go back to the gold rush days, you're working out in the gold fields and you're getting covered in dirt and mud and all of that. And it's like eventually you've got to try and wash yourself and get clean. And you've got to get your clothes clean and all that. Well, if you had a river or a stream or that nearby, it was generally running pure mud because wherever the gold fields were, everybody was using the water to actually wash the material. So using the water in the stream, not much good. So one of the things, I say, particularly here in Australia, is they used to have bath tents. And you'd go to a bath tent, and if you went early in the morning, you might be lucky and you might get a really clean tub of water. So you would pay premium price to actually get into a clean tub of water. Get in, have a tub, and if you had enough coin, you actually get one of the people that actually scrub your back and give you a really good clean. That same tub of water got used all day for bathing. So that water in that tub got dirtier and dirtier and dirtier and dirtier. So, you got there late in the afternoon, it was pretty dirty water. It's had soap and scum and that in it, but it might have had, 100 people go through that water. So it was starting to get pretty grey. That's grey water. And then, at the end of the day, did they tip that grey water out? Nope. Congratulations, Mike Anderson.
Make sure to email me, Mike. could find my email on the About page, or
Keep talking. I'm going to get another drink. I'm getting dry.
I'll show it here really quick. Whoops. Now I know you're here because you just said draw.
Draw. Congrats.
I won't hunt you down. Please email me right away so I can get it out to you.
So come the end of the day, when they'd have multiple baths, all right, they wouldn't tip that bath water out. They'd use that bath water to then wash the miners' clothing. So that water got reused again, and they just take all the miners' clothing and they wash the water, and that water ended up putrid. Can you imagine how dirty the clothing would be? And that's how we actually come up with those terms, grey water and black water. The more you use it, the darker the colour it got.
Now they use it for your poop tank. Black water's your poop, and gray water's your dishes and sinks and stuff.
Yep. So back in the gold rush days, they didn't use water with your sewage.
Right.
It was just a hole dug in the ground.
Right.
But the last of the water that got used was generally to wash clothing. And so when you actually had plates and that, it just was whatever water you had, give it a bit of a rinse off with, a bit of dirty water, bit of sand and grit, and that helped clean the plates and the cups off. And then you give it a dry, and hopefully it wasn't too dirty and you wouldn't get sick off eating it.
Brian counting away.
Just with Terry there talking about the water courses. Even the water in those, Terry, was quite often polluted. It wasn't suitable for drinking. You would have to boil the absolute crap out of it. So again, most of the water that they used for drinking and cooking and that was carted from a clean water source from a long way away into these gold fields.
Or they drank beer or whiskey.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of spirits.
Mead.
Yep. But it would have been harsh conditions. I say we have no concept today of how those people used to live. No concept at all. It was a harsh lifestyle, and so a lot of people died of disease. A broken leg, broken arm, it could be the death of you. Things like pneumonia. They worked a lot in the dust. There was a lot of lung disease, a lot of like especially the underground miners. They had a lot of bronchitis, bronchial disorders. And so there was another bit of interesting stuff with the underground miners. The hard rock miners is quite often they'd be actually working in the mine, and they'd come across some good ore, all right? And they would, look around, no one's looking, they'd actually pop that in their shirt, and they'd take that back. And all through the night, where they used to have these hard rock mines, all these little huts, you'd hear chink, 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 chink. And that was these miners that had taken these ore samples, smuggled them out of the mines. They were busting them up in these huts. and actually getting the gold out of it. And that was quite often, they said, like reading in these old stories, that through the night you would hear all these dolly pots going and smashing up all these ore samples that they dragged out from these mines.
See you, Scott. Rob, how you doing, Y Gold?
And poisoning, there was a lot of poisoning used to go on back in the gold rush period. Deliberate and accidental.
There was a lot of stuff going on back then.
Yep. I say, when you talk about, and I can't really say too much about what used to go on during the American gold rush, but in Australia it was very much, you know, a cultural thing. So the Chinese were despised by everybody. Absolutely everybody. And the only reason they were despised is they were so good at actually gold recovery. They worked as
yeah. A lot of it was the same way here too, and it's they'd go to an area that was worked out, and they'd still outperform the 49ers, and then the 49ers would kick them out of the place where they forced them to work in the first place because they were so efficient. And then with native populations, at first it wasn't so bad, but when you start encroaching on their resources and food, you know, stuff happens.
Yep.
A lot of bad stuff.
The one thing that the Chinese were really good at was fine gold recovery.
Yes.
That was the one thing they were very well known for, is they could actually recover a lot of fine gold that, like you said, a lot of the Europeans, they'd actually go in, they'd chase the coarse gold and they'd let the fine gold go, and then the Chinese would come in and rework those areas and get phenomenal quantities of gold from material that had previously been worked. And again, that will happen again into the future. Like all these tailings dams that have quite a large quantity of fine gold in it that's been missed through the system, that hasn't been captured. As the processes improve in the years to come, they will go back through these tailings dams and they will recover a lot more gold and other metals. Yeah.
Yeah, it got really crazy for a lot of people. And even those dark sides of history need to, if we don't learn from it, we're gonna repeat it.
Yes, history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. I like that saying because it's very true. History doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. So we go.
I haven't checked yet, Mike.
You know, you look at the First World War, and then we had the Second World War, and then we've had a lot of smaller wars in between that weren't world wars, but they were quite large wars. And again, it was about resources. And, you know, it could be that we're coming towards another resource battle again where it will turn into another world war. So we're not going to repeat it, but we're going to go very close. We're going to rhyme with it again. Because I say, the world is starting to run out of resources. And we're all starting to fight for the same thing. We all want the same thing.
That's always been the case of war. resources. Always has and always will be.
Yep. And I say the price of gold, the more conflict there is in the world, the more the price of this stuff goes up.
It's that way a lot in Northwest Washington, Rob. There's a lot of cinnabar mines. And along with the old timers and the Chinese and stuff using mercury, we'd also have natural mercury too.
Yep. Virtually all modern mines produce byproducts, say such as mercury, arsenic. Just depends on where they are. So the mine that I used to work at, there was a mercury condenser in the gold room there because there was a couple of different processes to smelting the raw gold. So to go through 2 processes before it actually went to the crucible to be melted, and that was to remove some of those other metals that they didn't want in, and just to make it a bit safer for the actual refining process at the end. But when they actually did that final smelt at the mine I worked at, it was still not pure gold. It was still doré. And every time they poured ingots, you could look at the color of it. It would be different every single time. And so I was lucky enough to be actually able to handle these things and clean them up sometimes. And they're always a different color because there's always different amounts of metals mixed in with that gold.
Right.
Fun.
Yes, they did use them in their long toms and sluices. A lot of times they'd put copper plates in their sluices and put mercury on it. It would cling to the copper, and then the material goes over the copper sheet with mercury, and the gold would get ate up or
amalgamated
with the mercury on the plate. Then they'd scrape it off. And just like they did that on stamp mills also.
So that's exactly right. So with your old stamp mills, you'd have your stamper, you'd have screens, there'd be mesh screens in the stamper, and then below that you would have your box. All right, and like Ed said, they used to put sheets of copper on it, and then you'd have a guy, and his job was the mucker, and he used to take the mercury on a rag, and he'd smear it onto those copper sheets. And as the water was getting dumped through the stamper, and it was washing all the crushed material through the screen, as that washed material traveled across that copper sheet with the mercury on it, the gold would stick to the mercury and the sands would travel across it. Now, if you weren't watching very carefully what was happening, quite often is your mercury, if you let it run too long, would start to amalgamate ball, and it would start to roll, and you'd start to lose amalgam out of the end of it. And I've worked quite a few areas.
They'd have to be on their toes to make sure it didn't amalgamate too much and start rolling down. They'd have to redo it, scrape it, redo it.
I've worked at quite a few areas below the old stamp mills where I've picked up balls of amalgam where it's actually balled up and rolled off, simply because they've let it run too long before stopping it and cleaning the beds off. Yeah.
Me too, Randy, Scotty, Tony.
So mercury as its liquid form is not too bad. It's when you turn it to its gaseous form that it's most dangerous. It will absorb into your hand. So if you've got a bit of mercury and you've got it sitting on the palm of your hand, it will start to absorb into your skin, right? With all heavy metals, once they're in your body has a very hard time removing it. But absorption through the skin is one thing. Breathing it is another thing entirely. That's the most deadly way that you can get mercury into your system. If you breathe mercury vapors from heating it, you'll get sick very, very quickly. And I say it was the guys that used to retort the amalgam that used to suffer the most. They were the ones that got poisoned a lot in the old gold rush days.
Yeah. Now you've heard the Mad Hatter.
Yep.
Here in the Pacific Northwest, when they were making beaver hair top hats and stuff, they'd use mercury in the process, and people would go mad with by mercury poisoning from their hats.
Yep.
Maybe that's why I'm so mad. I wear so many hats.
It was generally the manufacturers of the hats. They were the ones that actually got the mercury poisoning because they were forever
too.
putting on the very, very fresh hats. The mercury was the strongest content, and as soon as you put it on your skin, and they're putting these hats on day in, day out, so they got what they call Mad Hatter's disease.
Right. It's kind of like the ladies back in the day when X-ray first got started. They would check the X-ray machine by X-raying their hand, and get all messed up. Yep. Well, we're in overtime, my friend Andrew. Hey, DK, thanks for opting in. I appreciate it. Everybody, DK and Tony. Oh, what's a mile high in foot? I forget Tony's channel name, DK, but Adventures in Dirt and Tony, they have a great podcast. Go ahead, shout it out. You should be a moderator. You've been on the show a couple of times. Go ahead, put out your link, DK, for Relics Radios. Great show. Tony and DK do a great job. Sorry, I have to give props where props are due, and DK and Tony do a great job on their show and have some great metal detecting content. Next week we're having Adam from Nice Guys Prospecting, and I'm talking geological, nice as in the stone, nice, kind of have metamorphic and intrusive and extrusive. You have nice Guys Prospecting will be on. I believe he's out of Massachusetts. So you New Englanders and other massholes might be interested in joining us next week on Tuesday Night Hangout Live. Andrew, if we're not careful, it'd be another half hour or an hour before we get off here. And I still have to do my daily report for work, plus my post-production stuff. Mr. Lodak, is there an after party on Zoom over at goldprospectorspace.com? And remember, catch Prospectors Radio every Sunday at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time here on YouTube. And there is an after party, links in the chat, or you could find the link over at goldprospectorspace.com.
Lower the volume there. Yeah.
I hear your background stuff.
Not in the air, you don't.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. I look forward to episode number 5. If you're willing, That will be next month on the 28th, if it works for Andrew. Everybody, until next time, may you always have a flash in your pan. And you know what I like to say, because it does happen. Maybe one day too, we'll meet you on the river. But right now, we're out of here.
Tuesday Night Hangout Live. We've had our fun. The battery was strong, the night's been won. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you soon. Tuesday Night Hangout Live is for all of you. FlashFam forever. We'll keep the vibe. Catch us next time. Let's keep
Night
it
comes real
live.
close. We're feeling great. FlashFam is together. Whenever it feels just right. Wonderful guests, good times, and so much fun. Tuesday Night Hangout Live will turn very soon. Thank you for joining us. It's been a fantastic time. Camaraderie is strong, and we're built to last. Till next time, we look forward to seeing you again. Tuesday Night Hangout Live will be back soon. Give us a like. Don't say goodbye. Just see you later. FlashFam forever. Until we meet again.